Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and about 8 months ago I made a video that ended up performing really well. It's one of my most viewed on my channel, and it's where I ranked the 7 schools in Wizard101. So, it's been 8 months, there's been some changes, I'm going to re-rank them. I do want to preface this by saying that none of these schools suck. That used to not be the case. There used to be a definitive worst school, but now you can play any school and have a lot of fun with it. It won't feel too slow, it won't feel too grindy, and overall, the game is just a lot more fun now in terms of, doing PvE than it has ever been before. So this is going to be my re-ranking of the 7 schools in Wizard101 in terms of how good they are. So, let's get started with number 7. Balance was made to be the jack of all trades school, and it is coming in here at the 7th place position. And yeah, I mean, Balance is definitely, it's a really good support school. It's one of the best support schools out right now, and it's a good thing to have a balance on your account because it is just that good at supporting. So the issues arise when you are questing it, and it's very tedious to say the least, because you have a good spell here in Power Nova. It is very strong, especially at X tier like I have it, and then Nested Fury is also really good, but your blades, like, okay, so you can use Blade Storm and Balance Blade on any school of magic and they will work. Now, the issue is that comes at a cost, and it comes at the cost of being, 10% less effective than all the other schools' blades. So you kind of get the short end of the stick here. It's like I do say, jack of all trades. So that's what Balance is supposed to be, but this it really just sort of hinders you throughout your gameplay. So buffing is harder, especially in the first couple of arcs. So buffing up that Power Nova, it can be tougher, but once you pull it off, like, it is a good and hard hitting spell. Definitely recommend playing a Balance if you like a challenge. So I would say that this is a good and challenging school to play, but I would not start off your new account with it. So that's all I'm saying there. The biggest drawback that I have seen when I'm playing my Balance is in the first 2 arcs, when you see a Balance boss, you don't really have that many options in terms of how you would normally play. You've got spells like Spectral Blast, which do mass, but they're also only 4 pips, so it's kind of a dice roll there. And then there's spells like Hydra, which just don't work well at all with feints. So early on, questing is very hard if you don't have a spell like Thernian Hydra that you get from your pet, and pet hatching is a whole thing. I'll probably get into that at some other time. So yeah, that is pretty much the Balance school. It is still good, and you will have fun questing it at points, but it is, in my honest opinion, the least good, I guess, school in Wiz. It's not bad by any means, and it is really good at support roles, but with just the essence of what the gameplay in Wiz just is, I would say the Balance is going to be at the bottom of the pack. Coming in the 6th spot is Ice, my beloved Ice, and this used to be far and away the worst school in the game by a long shot, but not anymore. It's like all of these little penguin guys, they are celebrating because this card right here got buffed. After 15 years, this card got buffed to deal adequate damage. It's crazy that it took them that long, but this is definitely a win for the Ice school. This spell being bad was why Ice was at the bottom for so long. It's like, in essence, most of Wiz is just, hitting as hard as you can and trying to play the game quick. And Ice was never really designed to be that. We still have the lowest damage and offensive stats in the entire game. It just sort of is what it is. But it is definitely not as bad as it used to be. And for context, this spell used to do 460 damage with the stun to all enemies. Completely just pitiful beyond belief. But this spring, the developers finally gave it a buff of about 110 damage, as well as a spell limit path to increase it by another 45. So you'll have to see that. Otherwise, Ice's main identity as the, shielding and tanking school, it's honestly not that great. It's just not like a real needed role in a team setting. So that's why it is still going to be down here at number 6. It's just the niche that it does have is not so great. But the overall gameplay, it really got a lot better with the Frost Giant buff. And I do wish that we could get our blade a little earlier than level 38, but we'll work on that another time. Maybe I'll make another this needs to change about ice video, but for now, Ice it's definitely not a bad school. Ice is no longer just the butt end of the joke, so I like it. Ice is finally a good school. I would recommend it. It is more challenging though. I would definitely say it is more challenging as a solo school, just because you go slower and it might take more hits to kill a boss here and there, that type of deal. And although it's not as good as the 5 other schools, Ice is still good in its own right, and I'd recommend it. I would recommend it to people looking to get into this game. It doesn't really have much of a niche, but it's still a fun little challenge to quest. So do that if you like a challenge, but if not, that's what the rest of the list is for. So life is in an odd spot. It's 5th out of 7 here, and its main niche is healing. And healing is definitely more useful than Ice's shielding mechanic, but overall, life kind of just fixes a lot of the problems that Ice has, and then is just fundamentally better in a team setting because of the healing that it can do. So it's spells like Forest Lord. This is your staple spell as a life wizard. This is a really, really good spell, and it makes questing on a life much, much easier. Now, I will say that questing on life earlier on in the game is going to be a bit slow, just because you don't get Forest Lord until level 48, and you don't get another 4-pip AoE before then like you do on 5 out of the 7 schools. So it can be slow, but I do still like the life school. It is a good school. Would recommend. It's just it's just not number 1 on the list. So life, good, but not the best. So that's where I'll leave it. I don't really know how else to explain. In 4th place, we have the Fire School, and Fire. It might surprise you to see this at 4th out of 7, but I would honestly recommend that every new account starts off with a Fire Wizard, because Fire is the damage dealing school that is not tedious to play and doesn't, die in 2 hits like Storm does. So Fire, I don't know. It's just a good school. I don't really know how else to really describe it. It is good in a team setting. It's it really and truly does mass with Fire Dragon. Spells like Raging Bull also do mass. And then, you've got spells like Sun Serpent. This one's really unique, and this one is slept on, honestly, by a lot of people. It does all of this damage up here, up front, to a single target. But there's a back end that hits every target. So, neat. So, Sun Serpent, this is a really underrated spell that Fire has. No other school really has something like this. Death kind of has a Magic Fossil, but it sucks. So, you get the idea. So Fire really is just an easy school to play, and it is definitely one that I would recommend that a new player starts off with. Fire is just, good like that. It doesn't, well, it fizzles slightly less than Storm, but you'll still have a fun time playing it. It is definitely a breeze to quest. You get good damage, you get good offensive stats, and you get good spells. Like, what more could you really ask for? It's like, your resist is still a little lower. It's a bit lower than Storms, or a bit higher than Storms rather, but lower than everybody else by honestly quite a bit. That is just how things are. Now, Fire, I would definitely say is like a 9 out of 10 school or above, and it's just that it gets outclassed by the others. It's kind of what's going on. It's like, when it comes down to the bread and butter of what Wiz really is, and what it's about, and the gameplay, that type of deal, Fire ranks among the best, and it is very, very good at the end of the game as well. So, let's move on to number 3. Coming in third, we have the Damage School, and that Damage School, of course, is Storm. Now, Storm has the highest base damage on their attacks, but it does come at the cost of accuracy and just survivability in general. Like, Storm will do a lot of damage, but it will also die very easily, and that's why it's not higher on the list. I'm pretty sure I put it a bit higher before, if I'm not mistaken. It's just the main thing that it fundamentally struggles with is just surviving, and this matters a lot, especially in the second arc, not so much in the third, but the fourth arc, it does kind of come back. It's just, if you get hit too hard, you kind of fall over and die, so don't let that happen, is sort of the moral of the story there. The issue is, in arcs like 2 and 4, there's just not much you can do. It's like, bosses will, like, straight off the rip, just hit you from ass, and that can be a real problem as a Storm, and you die real easy. And Storm's like whole MO is just beat the hell out of them before they beat the hell out of you. So that is just the life of the Storm Wizard, but it definitely does do the most damage by far. I should have my PvE sets on all of my characters, but I don't. But my Storm I definitely do. This is the max damage setup, and honestly damage caps do hurt Storm quite a bit, but the damage cap in question does allow Storm to run a lot of Pierce, and that is a very good stat to have as well. So Storm is a really, really solid school in PvE. Definitely not PvP. But as long as you can survive, you're pretty much good to go. It's like, because Storm really does have some seriously nutty spells. I mean, let's take a look at, you know, Bunyip's Rage, if I can ever find it. This is Storm's best, quote-unquote, 5-pip AoE spell. You can use this on turn 1 with an epic enchant that makes it do 925 Storm damage to all, which is pretty nuts, to say the least. And, you know, you've got spells like, you know, Tree of Strife, which is a single hit that, you know, takes a life pip, does mass damage, could do more if I was to take a top path. And speaking of top path, Storm really does excel at just dealing just totally nuts amount of damage. It's all about surviving long enough to pull it off. And in boss fights, like, Storm is just, if I was gonna call a class like the worst at soloing, I would say Balance or Storm. And Storm is down there because, again, you know, they die too fast, their health is low. I think this is the only school that, you know, does not have the 10,000 health on its damage cap build. But if you live to tell the tale, you will absolutely just annihilate your enemies. And that is, I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that. It's like, in the second arc, you kind of play with fire, because it's like bosses, you'll probably walk out of every boss fight like a pincushion from how much you just get hit and you get put on low health and that sort of thing. But Storm, overall, the questing experience is fast if you don't die. And I think that's the mark of a well-designed school, because that's Storm's whole deal with being the class canon. Like, very low resist, but very high damage and crit. And then Pierce is also pretty high as well. So, Storm, gonna have to put this at the number 3 spot. Definitely like an A tier school, 9 to 9.5. Coming in second place, and this is actually up a little bit from the last time, is Myth, and I have Myth in the second place spot. And you might be thinking, you know, oh well, wasn't Myth's whole identity for a whole time minions and summoning minions, and you know, those are useless. But in the years since, and especially more recently, there has been a trend that the developers have sort of been putting into place with how they balance gear. And basically, as I've been talking about a little bit throughout this video, the gimmicks that your schools have, they don't really matter too much. And Myth's gimmick with being summoning minions and I guess shield breaking utility, it's like the least useful gimmick in the entire game. But Myth's stats and spells are what just undeniably carries it. If I don't even have a Myth PvE set. That sucks. That's more like it. So, Myth is a really, really good damage school, but you'll also see that I'm using a glass cannon build and I still have almost 50 resist. That is because recently Myth has been made out to be a pierce and resist school. And as we know, damage doesn't matter too much because there is a cap at around 235, so get close enough to it and it really doesn't matter. So Myth, despite being, you know, not as much of a damage school as Storm, gets above it because it's basically just Storm if it had a much harder time dying. So as you can see, I mean, 10.76k health with 50 resist with a glass cannon build. That's kind of just how it goes. And then, you know, 51 pierce, which is insane. It's like my Storm build at max damage at 55. And then Myth, I mean, it's like I have Storm stats like just ever so slightly lower, but I don't die. is the main thing that Myth has over Storm. And I should really get these up with like Eon boots or whatever. But the main thing is with Myth is that its stats and its cards are so good. It's like I said this before. You need to really think about like Orthrus, max 3 Orthrus, 745 damage to all. Pretty crazy. Myth also has Drop Air Fury, which does mass on the first turn, and I mean, Myth's spells, like look at this, Ninja Pigs, 735 for 6 bips. It's a single hit, but is what it is. Mystic Colossus will pierce a shield before it hits, and then like Baba Yaga does so much damage. Like, this is absurd. And then Stone Colossus, this is my personal favorite, it will take 4 weaknesses off of you before it hits. That's nuts. It will, it's like this is such an insane single hit. And then it's like Myth has Medusa for a 2-round stun. Myth has, you know, like a Scion that is very easy to set up, very hard for like a mob or a boss to counter. Like Myth is just an insane school. It's like Myth has just the nuttiest card library. It's got, I mean, it like Shatter. This is an insane card just to have. It's got Shift for bosses that like tend to go for overtimes, like Poison Oak and Imperia, the Pendragon at the end of Avalon. This is just a direct counter to that, so that's neat. And then, I mean, like just insane Shad hits. Myth just sort of has it all. Like, and when I show you the #1 school, you're gonna understand why Myth is second place. Because right now it's like Myth having all this damage, having all this pierce, being able to live with Storm's stats pretty much, and having better cards than Storm. That's where we're at. It's like you would expect a school like that to be #1. Myth is an S tier school for that reason. So I guess without further ado, I should finally show y'all the school that takes the #1 spot by a long shot. And I've already shown you Myth, so the school that takes #1 by a long shot is just insane. Now, let us not get it twisted. Death is going to be the best school of all time for ever, pretty much, because as long as the drain mechanic exists, death is going to be the best. Like, death is built so different. I was talking to y'all about myth and how insane its stats were, but okay, do I have like a main set here, or this I guess would be the main set. So this can go higher. I just don't have my last damage jewel socketed, but this, it's like the resist. This resist can also go higher. If I was using the Jabalba boots like I was on my myth, it's like I can have like over 50 resist, hit the damage cap, have perfect accuracy, have insane crit and block as well, 51 pierce, just like my myth, and then, you know, I can obviously like socket a pip jewel somewhere, and then, I mean, it has myth's stats, which is already insane, and then it also has nuts utility. It's like myth has nuts utility, but death has nuts utility. Think about a spell like Dark Pact. You can give this to any school in the game, any hitter. So if you're a death and you're supporting, it's like death, just so we're clear, death is the best support school as well. So death can Dark Pact and take off like a weakness, and like death can empower and take off a weakness. Death also has, you know, feint, and then like before we get to the drains, I'm pretty sure everybody knows about the drains already, but death has stuff like V-Plague, which will just is just debilitating to use on a boss. Sacrifice, which is a good heal if you're a death looking to do that. Beguile is kind of nuts. I mean, most bosses in the game are immune to that, but still kind of crazy. And then Bad Juju, this is sort of like, this is a very like famous card because it, back when the Storm Titan was still hard, you kind of needed a death to be spamming this in order to win. That's just how it was, and it's kind of just crazy how versatile death can really be. And you know, you've got spells that, you know, drain health, and if you've already got setup on, it can just absolutely debilitate the target, which is kind of insane. And then it's got like a shad that does mass. Like you can take this to 8 pips for PvE only, and it just does so much with those weaknesses. It's nuts. And then you can also counter auras. If I had this spell up a little more, like the spell limits, then I could counter auras with Monster Mash, and then like I can push a weakness to a target before I hit with a shad, and like it is so wild. It is so wild just how insane Death's card library is, and the main pride and joy of Death is Scarecrow and Call of Curlew. These are AoE drains. So the damage that you do with a Scarecrow, let me quickly just throw in some of this. If I could just throw in like a Frenzy and a Call of Curlew. I'm going to run into a battle here with these Wabagong Sharks, and y'all are just going to see. Y'all are going to see. So, for turn 2, you know, these Wabagong Sharks, they have 4,700 HP. Now, Death was never a damage school up until recently. Death's damage per pip value that the devs use to balance spells with, it has always been lower. But when it comes to drains, this is where Death shines. You can solo anything as a Death Wizard. It's like, you gotta think about that. Anything in the game can be soloed as a Death Wizard. And if Faerieque ever decides to come back, I support his cause, just clear that up. But if he ever does decide to come back, he will have a video of him soloing the 1 versus 8 Hall of Heroes fight before it was nerfed on a Death Wizard, because he could, because of this 7.7k, and I heal for 8k. That's crazy. That is fundamentally, that is like AoE drains are the most overpowered spells in the game. Call it Curlew, it's like it does more damage, costs a shad, heals back a little less, but still just, you know, mass. And then Scarecrow, obviously 630, as well as the recent enchant buff on drains where it applies to full value. So technically it is putting 450 more value on a spell that is already like what, 945. So 450, 945, an epic enchanted Scarecrow without any buffs and before any of the damage multipliers are ever even considered has a value of 1,395 for 7 pips. I don't think I really need to say more. Death is the best school in the game by far. The only possible drawback I could think of just even remotely is the fact that it doesn't get an AoE spell until level 48 when Scarecrow comes around. But I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I don't think I really need to explain myself much more. Anybody who's played Wiz knows that Death is just by far the most insane school in the game. It's the best at support. It's a good tank school. It's a good damage school. It can solo 1 versus 8 fights. And I think that's just where I leave it. So thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. And I'll see y'all later.